Hey, welcome to another episode of You Inc. Thank you for tuning in this episode. This is kind of my Independence Day episode. I'm actually recording it before the 4th of July, but here in the United States, I'm actually recording it on Canada Day, which is pretty cool. I didn't really notice Canada Day until my son started playing hockey, and I got to know a lot of great hockey families, and today is Canada Day. So happy Canada Day. Happy 4th of July. But I'm doing this episode because I think it's important that in our life when we're trapped, we try to find a way out. We try to find freedom. We try to find just a hole in the fence to get to that place that we want to go. And I'm going to talk about some times in my life where I felt trapped and I found liberation through doing this, what we're going to talk about today. Today's episode is called The Secret to Finding the Business Inside of You. Now, this same secret can work in a lot of cool ways, not just business, but I love it because I know it did it for business. But I'm going to talk about my childhood too and some things that happened when I started learning about this the secret, like this formula of doing things. And back then I did it by accident because I didn't know any better. But I look back on my life now and I realize, wow, this really helped me. So thank you for tuning in. Sit back, relax. This is going to be a good episode. We're going to get in really deep. It's just me, no guest. I'm just going to share some truth bombs and some really great insights that I've used in my life to get me where I'm at right now. So let's get started. All right. I'm going to start out with the quote that I love that's in the book from Jay-Z. I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman. And that's kind of what my book is about. That's what this podcast is about you're not a business person, however you identify. You are the business. Who you are is the business. And the more you think about that, the more you realize that, especially because if you're starting off, like if you have a job and it's going to be your first side hustle, you're not like building the next Facebook. You know, that's kind of hard to use that statement here. But when you're starting out, you really are the business. You're the first person. You're the one that figures it out. You have the idea. You build the thing. You find the clients. You do customer service. You are the business. Now, people asked me, why didn't you call the book Me Inc.? I don't know if you guys know this, but Gene Simmons wrote a book called Me Inc., which is kind of funny, about his life, about me. But this book is not about me. This whole concept is not about me. The concept is about you. And I want you to think about this. Next time you're in front of a mirror, look at that person in the mirror and say, it's not about me, and point at yourself. It's about you. It's about that person you see in the mirror. You have to learn how to love that person. You have to learn how to take care of that person. You have to learn how to turn that person into the business. Because when we focus on me and ourselves, we tend to play the victim. Poor me. I can't do this. But when I focus on you and I think about you as myself as almost another person that I learn how to love, the same kind of love if you've ever felt from a parent or anybody, or maybe how you think about God. You got to love yourself at that level. And then the second you is everybody else, like everybody. When you build a business that helps other people and that's your goal, that's your driver, nothing can stop you. Not a bad economy, not a pandemic, not political stuff, taxes. Nothing can stop you. That this is probably the biggest secret to all of it is learn how to take who you are and help as many people as possible. It's been in a lot of books. It's been in, the secret to success is helping as many people as possible. And I saw that in my own life, and I'll talk about that later about, first you're just helping one person, then you're helping many people. But I really want you to think about this while we're talking about this concept. What gifts do you have? What struggles have you been through? What could you create that would give liberation or freedom to someone else? I mean, really think about that. The best businesses are like a gift to someone, whether it's a great steak or it's a great shirt or it's just someone helping you with your taxes. They've given you something great, a service, enjoyment, maybe relieved you from pain, maybe gave you entertainment. But when you start thinking that way, you will be able to build a business. This really is about the person that is like, I want to build a business. Like, I want to get out of my cubicle. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, about being stuck in a cubicle And what do you do next? And how do you go to the next thing? So I want you to really visualize with me as I'm talking about this. I'm actually shooting this as a YouTube also. So if you're watching on YouTube, awesome, go listen to the podcast. And if you're on the podcast, I will have a link to where I'm at on YouTube. It's just Travis Rosser. If you search for me, you'll find my page and you'll find this episode. So let's get started. Now the dots, I'm going to talk about the dots. If you ever heard me speak, this is in the book too, is the concept of the dots. And Steve Jobs said this: you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Isn't that awesome? Like, if you think about it, like, if you look back on your life and you think about the job that you have or the marriage you have or the kids, whatever it is, even bad stuff, you can see the dots that connected to get you to there. But what do you do when you're like, all right, I'm going to head over there, like somewhere far? Like, my journey into entrepreneurism, started back when I was a kid. And then as I got older, it was bigger and bigger dreams. As I read books, as I had mentors like Steve Jobs, who I never met. I love his quote. I love everything Steve did when it came to building a business and a product and really a culture and a movement behind his product. The bigger I dreamed, the scarier it got. And I've noticed that whenever I have these big, scary dreams, I start getting scared because of this next quote. This quote's actually my quote, is stop trying to connect the dots. You have to stop trying to connect them and just start collecting dots. I mean, think about this, the dots of your life. We're going to visually do that in a minute, where you're going to actually close your eyes. You're going to think about the dots from your childhood, from a job, from a disappointment, from a huge accomplishment, from a hardship, a struggle, a pain, a problem. Maybe it was your athletic talent. Who knows what the dot was? But when you look backwards, it's easy to connect the dots. It's easy. It starts to make sense. And the point of what we're going to talk about in this podcast is how to do it moving forward when you haven't connected the dots. But there's a dot you want to head towards. You know that. But maybe that dot is so far away from where you are. Like, I think of it like this. Like, imagine you're up in the sky and your dot is something you can stand on. And the next dot is a dot that's really far away and you're up in the sky. So if you miss it, you're going to fall. It's like you're scared. How are you going to get to that next dot? It seems overwhelming. I think that's why we give up on dreams sometimes. That's why we have small dreams, because if I dream small, I might hit it. It's cool. Or if I don't dream at all, I have to worry about hitting it. But if I dream big, it literally causes anxiety. My dreams cause me anxiety on a regular basis. But I love it. Like, I wouldn't change it for anything. I love having this big, crazy, impossible goal and keep trying to find a way to get there, because I did that as a child. I did that in business, and huge things happen. But I really want you to think about that. So we're going to help you connect the dots. I'm going to talk about my dots, and then we're going to get to the secret of what you do after you've looked back, you learn about dots, and you make some new dots. So let's start with my dots. Those of you who know me, you've heard some of my story, but let me start with this. And we're back to dots, visual dots. Let's say I'm up in the sky. If you've ever played the game Minecraft, or if your kids have ever played Minecraft, there's this mode of the game called the Skyblock Challenge, and it's basically you're up in the sky and you're on this floating island. The blocks are literally floating in the air, and you have your chest of stuff, and you don't have that much stuff, but you have to play the game from there. And to me, that's life. That's business. You only have whatever resources you were born with, wherever you were born, whatever country you were born with, whatever. If you're lucky enough to have any kind of legacy with your family, maybe you don't. Maybe you're the first one. But that's your dot, and you're stuck up in the sky. And it can be scary. And people might be like, I don't want to move. I just can't move. Or I'm just going to allow myself to fall off of this dot. But let's think about, what if we just started building bigger dots and finding other dots? So here we go, back to my childhood. I grew up in a very small town here in California, in the middle of California. I don't know if you guys know this. There's farmland. I know people think Hollywood or San Francisco or San Diego when they think California, but right in the middle is the San Joaquin Valley. It is the richest farmland in the world. Literally per acre, the amount of fruits and vegetables and produce and dairy products that come out of there it's one of the highest producing areas in the world. So I grew up in this area where small town, super small town. Both my parents were teachers. My dad was a football coach and a baseball coach my entire life. And I also saw like poverty. I thought we were poor, but now I know we weren't poor at all. We were very middle class. And then I saw farmers that were very successful and had, everything you could want. And so that's how my childhood was, how I saw kind of the world. It's funny. We were in the middle of California, so you see the Sierra Nevada mountains. And I remember as a little kid thinking there was nothing beyond those mountains. I thought the ocean was on the other side. I don't know how, I must have been like 3 years old, 2 years old maybe. And I'm like, that's the end of the world. It's funny. That was my dot at that point. Well, there was another dot that I had as a kid, and it was stuttering. And this was something that was so difficult for me. And if you think about your childhood, like on my screen here, when you watch this on YouTube, I have one big dot for childhood, but the reality of childhood was its own series of dots. And the biggest dot that kind of got me stuck was stuttering. I mean, I was the kind of kid from 4 until I was 18, basically my entire childhood. I couldn't talk. If I tried to talk, I sounded like it wouldn't come out. It was like I was stuck. And that dot was so terrifying. It was so terrifying. I never thought it would go away. I used to dream of a day when it would. See, my life consisted of this. I would go to school. I would come home. I would get my dog. I would go outside on the small farm that we had, 20 acres. And I would just imagine life. I would imagine my future. I even imagined what it would be like if I didn't stutter. And I was the kind of person that was always praying and talking to God. And I would ask God, why do I stutter? Can I stop stuttering one day? Is it possible to take this away from me? And I literally visualized me talking without this problem. Of course, then I'd go back to school. I would think of something funny to say, and then I would try to say it, and I'd become the joke. And it was like the worst. But it also made me more and more internal, where I just put everything inside, which allowed me to be a very creative person that can think through things and recognize things and analyze things. But during that time, that part of my childhood was difficult. It was a difficult thing to deal with. But it was probably the first time I dealt with a dot, and then I had set another dot, which was not stuttering out there. I didn't realize I was doing this, but I know I dreamed of it. You know how it is when you're a kid. You have dreams. You have this like fantasized version of the world where I could do this. I could become a baseball player. I'm going to become a fireman. I'm going to become the president. Like, you have those big dreams. Well, one of my big dreams was I'm not going to stutter when I'm an adult, because I don't know what the age is, but there's a certain point that if you're still stuttering when you're like 11 and 12, I don't know the age, I'm not a doctor, you become an adult stutterer. And to me, that scared the crap out of me. It literally scared me. And I always thought one day I'm not going to stutter. Well, there was another dot that I had. My parents, and I write about this in the book, and this is probably the number one driver that has made me successful and made me build my businesses and build Kajabi and help other people become millionaires and me become a millionaire, is the way I viewed money as a kid. My parents, like I said, very middle class. They had teaching jobs. They had steady paychecks. It was the same thing every month. But they weren't very good with money. So as a kid, my observation was, oh my God, they're so broke. Oh my God, they're not going to be able to pay this. Oh my God, they're going to run out of money. I remember being in the back of the car as a kid and listening to them and just stressing and thinking, how could I help them? What could I do to fix this? And so then in my mind, I had a new dot, and that dot was learn how to make money. Like, learn how to be able to come back and take care of your parents. I had put that dot out there. And again, that dot seemed impossible. But now I look back and those dots have all connected, and it's pretty awesome. Now I have a new dot that's coming onto the screen in the school. That's kind of my next big cluster of dots, if you will. Because, you've got childhood consists of however you're raised, whoever was in the household, where you were raised. Did you have a mom or dad or a grandma or someone there, hopefully, or who knows what your journey was, but those are your childhood dots. The next dots start coming with school. And for me now, school and childhood obviously connected, everybody's are. The stuttering dot is an issue every time I go to school. In fact, every time I have to speak in front of class, which didn't happen too often, but it did sometimes, man, it was so embarrassing. I could feel it. I could feel the anxiety when I knew I was next. And I could feel it in my throat, and I could feel it in my chest that I was going to have to speak or read something, and it scared the crap out of me. And then that led me to really not do well in school. I later learned that I have dyslexia. Like, things are always backwards. Reading's extremely difficult for me. I have ADD, which a lot of good entrepreneurs have ADD. It's a gift too. And so those years were difficult. Like, it was hard. I look back though, and it's funny. After I had kids, I look back and I remember all the good things. As an adult, I was like, oh, me, all these terrible things. But I look back and it was a wonderful childhood. Great parents. So grateful for what they could provide for me and the example they were for me. And the fact that they just kept pushing me into school. The next big dot is money. Now, the money dot I talked about a minute ago, but that dot was stressful for me because I thought my parents were always out of money. I thought they were always broke. And I had set this dot out there that I am going to figure out how to make money. And so as a kid, man, I did everything. I mowed lawns. I raked people's leaves. I sold snow cones. I sold the oranges from our farm. I even went and drove to other towns to sell them because I figured out supply and demand. If you go somewhere else where they don't have a lot of oranges, like I'd go to Morro Bay or I'd go down to Los Angeles and I'd sell the oranges. And they did a lot better. I even learned some cool marketing tactics back then. I was at this auto parts store because now I'm a teenager so I can drive. And they had air freshener that was made out of orange peels. It was actually fully made from the peels, nothing else. And when you sprayed it, it smelled so good. It smelled just like that orange smell. So one time we went over to San Luis Obispo here in California at the farmer's market, and we're spraying this spray, and people would walk by and go, "Your oranges smell incredible. This is amazing." I kind of feel bad, but that was one of my first marketing tactics that I did. Now, let's go back to money. Now, everything I thought about money was from my parents. It was how they saw money. And I had a lot of fear around money. I had a lot of scarcity around money. I know that if you're going after big goals, you have to remove scarcity. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to show you some ways you can do this because you can't think small. You have to think big. You have to think what if, like on one of the episodes I just had, Dr. V, go back and listen to that if you don't. And Dr. V talks about going from, he was making $8,000 after he quit being a surgeon to now he's making $20,000 a month. Now there's disclaimers that this is not like a how to get rich or anything like that. I'm just talking about you have to change your mind and know it's possible. It's possible to bring in more money than you can ever imagine in a month or a year. You got to start thinking like that. And so my mindset had this goal, but then it had all these hangups and all these anchors of the way my parents thought that money's bad. Money's the root of all evil. This is just how it is. We don't have that money because, you weren't raised in that kind of family. All these things that were in my head. And then the other thing was go to school, get a good degree. But here I am struggling in school, which was very confusing for me. Get a good degree and then get a job. That was always the thing, that was the thing. That was the dot out there was career. What are you going to do when you grow up? How am I going to make the money? I know I want to make money, but I'm like, crap, what am I going to do to make this money one day? And so I continue to go to school. I eventually graduate from high school. I then go to Fresno State and I flunk out. I joined a fraternity and literally went out almost every single night. There's a place that'll sell you a beer almost every night. And I just stopped going to class. And so I had a 1.7 GPA and I dropped out. After doing some things over the summer, I finally went back to the school down here. It's called Azusa Pacific. They let me in with a 1.7 and I got back on track and I finished my college career and I got a job. I got my first job out of college. I was a marketing manager for an office supply store. And I was like, oh, this is it. I made it. This is it. I made it to this dot. And I was even making good money, I thought. And then not even 1 month into it, I was like, oh crap, this is it. Because you know how in life you always look forward to the next thing, and it works well for what we're talking about, the next dot. So, you're a kid and you look forward to the weekend. Then you look forward to summer. Then you look forward to, next year. Then you look forward to when you're going to be in middle school. And then you look forward to high school. And you look forward to graduating. You might look forward to college and maybe graduating and then getting a job. But then it's like, that's it. Like, that's the end. I remember being in a cubicle and just thinking, this is it. What the heck am I supposed to do? Now, I eventually shifted things around. I quit that job. I learned everything I could about the internet. This is back in 1998. So over 20 years ago, I got deep into building websites, web software, applications, and, things boom from there. So that's a whole nother story. But my point is, I thought that was the end. Like, I was literally stuck. I remember thinking in the cubicle, if I work super hard, I can get promoted and I'll go to that office in the corner. That's great. And they'll pay me just a little bit more and I'll work a lot more and I'll be a lot more stressed out. And I'm like, this just isn't right. So I started really on that journey of the side hustle. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going to do design jobs on the side. Maybe I'll help someone make a logo. I remember I'd open back then the Yellow Pages and I would call other design firms and pretend like I was a client just to hear what they would say. Just to be like, all right, how much do I charge? Okay, that's $50. Okay, that's $200. Cool. Because I had no idea. You know how it is when you're finally like, okay, I'm going to try this thing, but you don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. Well, that's a cool way to do it. And now with the internet, oh my gosh, with YouTube, with all the Kajabi courses I've seen, you can literally learn how to do just about every single business, side hustle, anything you can think of, you can learn how to do that thing. Now, at this point, everything that has to do with career is attached to my childhood, obviously. It's attached to school because I have a marketing degree. It's attached to money. But it was like, I wanted something else. Like, I was looking for those other dots, the side hustles. I did like SEO. I built websites for people. I sold stuff on eBay. I remember I met a guy at this flea market that had this cool shade that went on a chair. And I'm like, you should sell these on the internet. He's like, I don't know how to do that. And so I'm like, I'll partner with you. And so I went and bought gotshade.com. I don't think it's there anymore. And I built him a little e-commerce site and I would sell them on the internet. And I made like between $500 to $1,000 a month selling these shades for this guy. I'd go to his garage once a week and just put them all in the mail and ship them out. Like, that was my life. That's how I always thought. I always thought outside the cubicle, if you will. But I also felt like the cubicle was such a trap. Like, I used to call it cubicle farms. Because one time I had a project I worked on for United Healthcare. Huge. They're here in Irvine. Back then, they had a building that had, I don't know, maybe it wasn't a huge building, but it had like 5 floors. Every single floor exactly the same. Just cubicles. So if you got off the elevator at the wrong floor and you didn't know it, you were screwed. You were like looking around, everything's the same. The conference rooms are in the same place. There's cubicles on this side of the building, this side of the building. I remember I'd try to find like landmarks, whether it was a plant or maybe a different type of chair in the conference room so I could get back to my floor. Because sometimes they would say meet at this meeting, but I wasn't sure. And so I'm going through elevators. It was hilarious. But my point is this, like, I felt so trapped in that world and so overwhelmed that I remembered back to my dad. I remembered how, he was living paycheck to paycheck because he never dreamed beyond. That was his, his finite amount of money, fixed income. Now for me, I have always been someone that has thought bigger. And I think because I don't know if I said this part, I moved kind of fast, but stuttering went away. Obviously, I'm here talking. It just went away. When I was around 19 years old, it just stopped. And I think in the back of my mind, I know that now because I lived the kind of life where I know if I put my mind to it, I can do anything. But that was always my mindset was if I want this thing, I should go for it. Even if I had no idea how or if it was possible. Because stopping stuttering, first of all, probably wasn't possible. It was completely out of my control. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. That's kind of what this is all about. This is the secret formula I'm going to show you because a lot of things you're going to need are going to be out of your control. But there's a way to start turning things in your favor. Now, I tried everything back then. I tried speech therapy. Tried everything. I even tried to like close my teeth and try to talk like this, or like change how I pronounce words. And it just, it just didn't go away until it was going to go away. Now back to career. Now, because I had all these side hustles, I mean, I was in everything you can think of to make money on the internet. I loved the concept. I used to build websites and then I'd resell them on eBay. This was like a thing. Like you could go buy some code and maybe build like a photo sharing site, and I'd put a brand on it, and then I'd put it for sale on eBay. I think there's a site now called Flippa, and that's all it does. But back then I would do that on eBay. I might spend 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday and sell it for like $700. And for me, that was like, this is amazing. But I was always searching for that thing. So I was reading books. In fact, I got an Audible subscription way back in like 2003. And I had like the original subscription, 5 books a month. And that year I read every single book, 60 books. Because I realized if I'm going to get out of this cubicle, I have to learn beyond where I'm at. You know, the more you learn, the more you earn. And I had to push myself outside of this dot, this cubicle. And it led me to, in 2004, I went to an event, and it was the Internet Marketing Center. It was done by Derek Gale and Corey Ruddle. If you guys know who that is, this is old school marketing. He's like the founding fathers of internet marketing. He had died, and I had seen emails from this guy forever. And then I see an article about him in the Orange County Register, and I'm like, this guy was real. Like, this was a real dude. He really did have that house, and he had these cars, and he actually, he was actually doing it. It wasn't just a spammy, infomercial. He was doing it. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the next one. So there was one in Newport in 2004, and Derek Gale was going to put it on. So I go to the conference, and I am blown away. Like, I hear stories. I meet people like Jermaine Griggs. Jermaine Griggs is in the book. I met Jermaine at this conference, and Jermaine was this kid that grew up in the inner city. He's not a kid anymore. He's in his 30s. But when I met him, he was like 20 something. Grew up in the hood of Long Beach. His grandma wins a piano on The Price is Right and teaches him how to play. And so he learns how to play, and he meets Corey Ruddle. He starts learning all Corey's stuff, and he goes and buys hearandplay.com. Still has it. And he makes DVDs on how to play the piano by ear, how to play gospel music. I mean, it was blowing up. By then, he was already a millionaire by the time I met him. Now he's even beyond. He now just like travels the world with his family. Great guy, incredible guy. But being at that conference and seeing that, there was another guy there that sold how to play Madden football, which is still around. I think Madden's still around, right? Yeah, it is still around. And he was selling DVDs on how to play and how to win. This is back in 2004. This is 16 years ago. And he was making $70,000 a month selling these DVDs. Now that planted a seed in my brain, and I had no idea why or why that was important. But man, it's stuck in my brain. I thought about that kind of stuff all the time. I would think about like, oh man, I could do this and I could sell this, or I could put these files together and I could sell that. Like, it made me think about how important it was to sell something that was digital, because you didn't have inventory. These guys, sure, they're shipping out DVDs, but the way I was thinking, I wanted to have something I could sell that would just automatically be delivered, which eventually led me to Kajabi, as you guys know. And, Kajabi was just an idea that we had because Kenny and myself, we had all these side hustles. He had side hustles. We had been friends for a long time. And we were trying to make this info product. In fact, I had an info product that I had created years ago on one of my side hustles called Shark Lagoon. And one of my friends, he had built this pond in his front yard, and it was a small pond. Like, imagine like a little koi pond, maybe 10 feet long, 4 feet wide, very decorative. But it was not koi. He put sharks in them. He was fishing somewhere, I don't know where, and he caught these really small mud sharks. And he looked them up. He learned about them. And he had seen guys that were building these things at that time. And so he builds it out, and he has sharks, literally sharks in this beautiful little pond as you walk through his front door, like his entryway, like part of his front yard. I'm like, dude, this is so cool. You should like make an ebook and we'll sell it on how to do this. And so we did. We built, it was called sharklagoon.com. I actually sold the domain, but we made some pretty good money. Made a couple $100 here and there. It was like really cool. Well, Kenny and I also Tried to build an info product. This is fast forward 2009. Now that was probably 2005. And we were going to teach, Kenny had found this thing called Crazy Spray. And it was like you could build a kid's car wash out of PVC pipe, sprinkler heads, and then they could ride their bikes through this contraption that you built. And it was like a car wash for their bikes, but it was really a toy. And we're like, we should sell these. And then we're like, oh, that's a lot of work. Well, let's shoot some videos and teach people how to do it. And so that's what we did. We shot the videos. We built the site. We set up WordPress and wishlist member, and then connected it over to ClickBank. And we're like, dang, this is like really hard with all the video hosting and the passwords and the payments. And we're like, what if we built a system that did this? And that literally was when the concept of Kajabi was born. It wasn't called Kajabi yet. God, we had so many names like Continuity Wave or Something Learn. We had no idea what we were doing. But that was when that was born. And that was really just by going to this dot and then going to that dot and then going to this dot. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because I'm going to help you find your dots, because my dots are easy right now. I can look back, especially because I just wrote a book, and I can see all these dots and I can see how they connect. In fact, the next dot that I got on here is You Inc. It's the book. That was the moment when I stopped and looked back and said, wow, I have been down this journey that I had no idea was going down. And I was being guided and I was heading towards something. There was failures here and there, sometimes really bad failures, but I just kept going to the next dot. And it wasn't until I wrote down, because basically You Inc. is 20 stories of Kajabi customers, but it's also my story of building Kajabi and leading up to Kajabi. And that was when the dot concept hit home. And I was like, all right, wow, all these things happen. Like, this is really cool. But as you guys know, I sold Kajabi in 2018. And here I am. I'm now off the Kajabi dot completely. I am firmly standing on the You Inc. dot. And I went through a time of celebration because, like, cool, I did it. I was able to exit. My wife, Paola, and I, and my boys, we went on vacations, we did a lot of fun stuff. But then it was like, all right, what's next? Like, what do I do? Well, I went through this process I'm going to share with you today. That's kind of a long beginning, but that's my journey. And I want you to think about your life this way. And now we're going to go over these steps. I'm going to show you exactly what got me to my next step, which, if you're familiar with the things I'm working on, CoachSnap is coming out soon. And getting to a concept of building a CoachSnap was me going through these steps. I'm going to talk about these steps. I did them every single day for over a year and a half, because I didn't have the CoachSnap idea right away. I mean, I did, but I wasn't sure. And then I held on to it for over a year. And then finally it started becoming clearer and clearer because I was doing these things. So now it's time to find your dots. And this is something that I had to do because I was out of dots. I mean, I had done all those things to build Kajabi. I had done the side hustle. I had jumped from dot to dot. But now I was like, I hadn't put any dots beyond this. Besides, exiting Kajabi, that was definitely a dot one day. Maybe expanding it or in writing a book was definitely a dot. But now I'm like, what do I do now? Like, have you ever been in that position where you're like, what do I do? Maybe during this pandemic, you've lost your job and you're like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? I know what that feeling's like, and I'm going to show you some things you can do that are really going to help. And these are things you do every day. I do them in the morning. Doesn't take very long. It's actually a very enjoyable experience because it's so positive and it's leading you in a direction. But this is something you need to do every single day. The first thing is you need to have some kind of journal. It can be anything that's simple that has paper in it. And you're going to do these steps every day. And the first thing is gratitude. You're going to stop every single morning. And obviously almost everybody in self-help and business talk about this, but what are you grateful for? Write that down every single day. What are we grateful for? I mean, I can look back on all those dots I just talked about and all the things I'm grateful for, whether it was the fact that somehow I stopped stuttering, somehow I finished school, somehow I built my company. There's a lot of things to be grateful for every single day. And even if you're having a hard day, you can still say, I can breathe today. You should be grateful you're hearing my voice right now, because that means you have enough finances and resources to have an iPhone or a computer to watch this or listen to this. That is a wonderful thing. Be grateful for that. That allows you to stand firmly on that dot and to give thanks to the dots before. And when you do that, you're going to start doing something which is called the law of attraction. And I know some of you know what that is, but it's really about energy. In our world, it's all about energy. Have you ever noticed how you're walking across carpet and you touch a person or a piece of metal and you get zapped? I hate that. It happens at my office here a lot. It's the carpet, I think. That's energy. There's energy inside of us. Have you ever noticed how someone can walk up from behind you and you can feel their presence? Like, isn't that weird? That's energy. Well, my wife always says, and this is a quote from someone else, the energy you put off is the energy, that I put off for myself as I'm going to attract. And that's what the law of attraction is. That's why gratitude will start to change the way you think, the way you act towards people. It'll also start to open up your eyes. Like, think about this. You see a car that you want to buy, like, I'm going to get this, BMW or Land Rover. And then all of a sudden you see them everywhere. That's because there's a thing in your brain that clicked on that now allows you to recognize what was always there. So what if you had a goal of, becoming a professional hockey player? Like, I'm going to become a professional hockey player. And you become more grateful and more grateful. You start heading that direction. Even if you're not going to make it, you start heading that direction. Here's a lesson I learned one time. I was 19 years old. I was working on a farm. One of my many, many jobs growing up is I was working on Brent Jackson's farm. He's like a friend of the family. And I'm plowing this huge field, and plowing is, I've got a big tractor. I've got the big plow implements behind the tractor that's turning up the soil and kind of getting it prepared so that irrigation water can flow down the row. And if you've ever seen a vineyard or a farm and those long lines, those are the rows. It's either a row of trees or a row of vines. Well, this was a row of baby trees. It was acres and acres. In fact, it was so long, it was about a quarter mile long. And I drove this huge tractor down the middle that had a 12-foot plow across the back and had 14 feet clearance, which is roughly 1 foot on each side. Not much clearance. And so, you drive the tractor and has the plow behind it, and you line it up and you set the plow down, you start dragging it through the middle, and it just drags this beautiful straight line right down the middle. But it's actually pretty hard to keep it straight. In fact, I think they use lasers now, but back then in the 90s, you did it manually. So at least you didn't have to use like an ox or something. So I'm sitting here and I'm plowing this field, and I'm looking over my shoulder to make sure I'm not going to cut these trees, because each tree is worth $15. I'm only making like $4 an hour. So if I break a tree, it's like almost my entire afternoon pay is gone. So you don't want to hit them with this plow. And I keep looking back, keep making mistakes. I get to the end, and like the farm manager comes over to me, and he was this wise old guy, and he says, "Dude, what are you doing? That's terrible." He's like, "You want to know how to get straight?" He's like, "Come down this aisle." He goes, "See that tree on the horizon? You focus on that tree." And this man was very religious, so he says, "That's God. Focus on God. Look at that thing, and then set the plow down and drive." And so I did it. I set the plow down, I drove, and you're going so slow, it takes 10 minutes to finish. It's a long time. I'm just staring at it. I get to the end, I pull the plow up, I turn around, I look, it's perfectly straight. And I'm like, that's insane. And so he comes over and he's like, "Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?" And he says, every time you look back at a mistake, your body shifts and the tractor shifts. And then you look forward, you shift again. And that is like life. If we look back on our mistakes and we're not grateful for them, then we make another mistake. We make another shift. But if we want to head towards our goal, it's important to look at that dot and focus on it. And also part of it is God. I believe in God. I think it's important to believe that God has a plan for you. God has something he's going to do for you. Now, the last thing when it comes to gratitude is be grateful for the future. Be grateful for this future that's going to happen. Like I said, when I was a kid, I was grateful that I was not going to stutter. I literally remembered how I would thank God that I didn't stutter. I remembered how I would thank God that I wasn't in the cubicle anymore. I remember days walking into Kajabi, and our first office was in Old Town Tustin. It was upstairs. So you walked up this narrow staircase and you opened the door. And every time I went in there, I would get goosebumps the first year. It was so amazing. It was such a miracle in my life. And we had it so designed so cool with wood floors and brick walls and all the cool startup things and foosball tables. And literally every day I walked through that door. and was reminded how grateful I was that I made it to that dot somehow. Because when I was heading towards that dot, I didn't even know it was going to be there. I had no idea it was going to be there. All right, the next step, there's only 3 steps in this, super easy. The next one is dream. And it's really about dreaming big. I mean, I talked about it like stuttering. I dreamt of not stuttering. I dreamt of a day that I could provide for my parents. I dreamt of moving out of my small town and actually making something and having an impact and doing something big. But to help you dream big, because I know some people this is hard, is you need to ask yourself this question. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you do? What would you build? Where would you go? Who would you marry? Like, this stuff works with relationships. Like, if you guys know me, you've met my wife, Paola. She's incredible woman. I'm so grateful for her. I met her 5 years ago after being married and having 2 amazing boys that I think are so incredible. But that marriage was hard, and it wasn't the best fit, and it really just ended because we couldn't find that place. And I'd kind of given up after that. Like, I dated a couple people, wasn't the best. But then when I was led to and found Paola, I was like blown away. Like, and I had journaled about this. I even had a list. I don't know if you guys know this. I had a list of 72 items. She talks about this on her podcast too. I had written down 72 items. A friend of mine had said, you need to make a decision-making funnel. So I wrote down 72 things. Like, my kids are going to think she's great. She likes hockey. She likes football. Ironically, Paola does not like football. Like, even how tall she was, to how she thought about God, how my parents thought about her. Like, she's a good cook. Like, she's my best friend. Like, I wrote down all these things, and it is crazy. She met 71. She doesn't like football still, but that's okay. But my point is, I started dreaming big. Like, and I didn't have someone on the other end of that. I just said, if I'm going to get married again, if I'm going to do this and be a good father for my kids and live a life, that I'm really doing great things, I want to find someone like this. And I just had it out there. And I just followed similar steps where I was grateful. And I knew one day, and it wasn't until someone said to me, who have you always wanted to ask out on a date? And for whatever reason, I hadn't even thought of this. At this point, I'd known Pay for 2 years. And I asked her out on a date, and she says no. Because she's like, I can't date a tenant, because she was our property manager at Kajabi. And I just knew, man, I knew one day that we were going to go on a date. And then 10 days later, she asked me, well, hey, can you help me with this business thing? Let's go have a drink. I'm like, we should probably have dinner so we can focus. That turned into a date. And actually 1 year later after that date, Pay and I got married. It was like this incredible thing. It was a dot I placed out there. I had no idea when it was connecting, but it had been connecting all these different times, like down to where I met her boss years before, which then allowed us to move Kajabi to a new location. We became friends with this guy. He was now our property management company. And then eventually she got a job there years later. And it's crazy how those dots and all of her dots led her right to me. So what are your dreams? Like, if you close your eyes, if you're not driving, and you dream big, what does a dream look like? Are they impossible? Do they do great things? Do you make a phenomenal amount of money? Does it completely change your life? Does it change your family's lives? You want to have, here's a cool update. My parents eventually had to sell that farm that I've been talking about just for financial reasons. And they moved in this tiny little house after that. And I remember it like killed me inside, and it kind of just hurt to watch my dad, who loves to be out in the country. He's now in the town, in this, nice little place. It wasn't terrible, but it was small for him. And man, I vowed, I'm like, I have to buy a place. Like, I have to get a place, for them. And then, I think it's been in 2015, I bought them this wonderful place back in Kingsburg, 3 acres right on the river. It's this wonderful place. Actually, as I'm recording, we're going to head there for 4th of July and spend time with the family. But that was a dream. In fact, this piece of property I have had on my vision board for a long time. I even have old Photoshops where I took the satellite shot and I zoomed in on it, and I dreamed about what I would do with the property. Isn't that crazy if you've ever had that happen, where you've dreamed about something and then it happened? I remember way back when I was the boy on the farm, I would whenever irrigation water would overrun, it would leave these long trails of water, and I would go out there with my shovel and I'd make all these rivers. And I remember imagining a life where I had a home on the river, because the Kings River in Kingsburg is kind of a big deal. And here I am, I'm now in my 40s, and I did it. Like, I literally connected that dot. And back then, there was no way I could think about how those dots were how they were going to connect. It was impossible. All right, make a list of these dreams. Write these things down. I did this with Kajabi. I remember while I had one of my last jobs in 2008, after 2008, I quit that job. Well, actually, it was the end of 2009 to work on Kajabi. It was my last paycheck job. I would at lunchtime journal out what I wanted to build. I wanted to build a software app. Kenny and I had been listening to this podcast called the Web 2.0 Show, and they talked about online software. And kind of back then, the closest thing you get to online software was like Gmail or, eBay working, or, there was stuff that had, username, passwords, had stuff, but it wasn't as many softwares as a service as there are now. I mean, there's a huge boom, but I wanted to build something like that made money all the time, like a little money tree that was always growing money all the time, and it would help other people. And I remember looking in the industry and writing down people's names like Frank Kern and Jeff Walker, Russell Brunson. Like, I wrote these guys' names down. I'm going to work with these guys one day. I'm going to meet these guys one day. And I didn't know them. I had no connections. But eventually those dots connected, and a lot of those guys helped us launch that original app, the original version of Kajabi. So start writing it down. Now, like I said, this is something I do every single morning. I'm grateful and I dream every morning. This is the thing that eventually led me to CoachSnap, because of these practices every single day. Started opening my mind, because I would start to visualize, all right, what's next? And I remember thinking, Kajabi was a movement. It was a movement. It still is a movement. And if you listen to the episode with Tamsin, which is episode 2, I think, we talk about that, because it was truly a movement. And I remember feeling like I'm not a part of that movement anymore. Like, I felt like the movement was this big ship in the ocean at night, and I fell off the back. And nobody knows I'm gone. And I'm like, what do I do now? Like, where can I find that kind of meaning? Because helping people with Kajabi was incredible. Meeting people that had become millionaires because of Kajabi was incredible. Knowing that the customers of Kajabi have made over $1 billion. My idea, going to that dot, made people over $1 billion. A lot of you listening to this, you're those customers. I've met you. Some of you guys are actually good friends. The book talks about these same stories. If I go back, I have sketches of me sketching out what a Kajabi might be. And Kenny and I meeting for lunch for years, just like dreaming. What could we build? Because both of us were like, we got to get beyond just our cubicles. He was able to work at home. Good for him. He did it for a long time. But we both were like, we got to go to this next step, this next level, beyond the paycheck. And it was really by doing these things. What could I do if I didn't fail? Make a list and then start journaling and sketching it out. Now, I'm a software guy, so I always have like the notepad full of boxes and like, this app's going to do this and you're going to log in here. Just how I brainstorm. Well, that's what led me to CoachSnap, because I thought about this. I love these stories in U Inc. But the hardest part about Kajabi is getting started. I mean, Dr. V said it. He finally said, if I don't fall off this rocking chair and die, then I'll build my course. And if you've ever built a course, you know how hard it is. Like, that hump, that psychological hump is difficult. Just to say, okay, I'm an expert. I know enough. Now I'll shoot some videos. I'll put it together. I'll upload it to something and I'll charge money. That's hard. But I thought, everybody's good at something. Everybody can help someone else. What if I could build an app that helps people do that? And it really goes back to this concept of, I used to watch my kids play video games. Fortnite was the big game, a couple years ago. And one of the two of them would be further along than the other. And, one might say, Kyle, help me out. And then Kyle would go help Connor and he'd show him, well, here's how I passed this part. And to me, that's coaching. That's helping. That's pulling someone ahead. I mean, I'm just like, I'm doing it right now for you. I'm talking about my dots that allowed me to get across this big, huge, valley. And I'm guiding you by telling you what I did to get there. That's coaching. And that really is where the CoachSnap idea came, because right now in the coaching space, there's a huge void. And it was the same thing we saw with Kajabi, where the technology wasn't quite there. And the technology that was available is kind of difficult to use, or you have to duct tape it all together. I mean, there is plenty of apps that will handle scheduling and billing and content and courses and tracking and membership and community and all the things that CoachSnap's going to do, because it's truly a business automation tool for your coaching business. But through sketching, through journaling, through dreaming, that's what led me to this idea to where now I know exactly what I'm supposed to build. I know exactly what that next dot is. And I did it by doing this. All right, so here's the last one, manifestation. And manifesting, I know it's kind of a woo-woo thing. It's kind of like, it might be a little too like out there, but it really does work. And when you start to visualize something and you start to imagine that it's going to happen, I talked about it. That's what happened with stuttering. I imagined the day that I wouldn't stutter. And it doesn't mean that if I'm positive, everything great's going to happen. What it means is if I look out at that point and I'm driving this massive tractor, I'm going to eventually get there. I'm going to eventually get somewhere, and I'm going to do less damage and make less mistakes. And that's what this does when you start looking at a dot and you say, I'm going to get there. You know how it is when you have a goal, you're trying to do something. Maybe at first you can't do it. If you visualize yourself doing it, like that's why when good things happen, a lot of good things happen. When bad things happen, you tend to get stuck in a rut. And that's because the power of actually manifesting it is stronger than we realize. Like our negative attitude can change things as much as a positive attitude can. You know how it is. You're around certain people. They're always negative. They're always complaining. There's always something going wrong. Then you're around other people and they're excited and they're positive. And I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I did a Facebook about that. I'm talking about reality. Like real, you love people, you love yourself, you love others, and you know you can do this thing. And typically it's because you have good intentions for that thing. And then it allows you to even visualize it even better. And the first thing is like I've got here on the screen, envisioning it happening. Imagine there is a Kajabi. There is this incredible office. I mean, the office of Kajabi was something that I saw for so long. After having so many cubicle corporate jobs, that was a place I always wanted to build for myself. I mean, both Kenny and I wanted this place that was this cool place to work, that other people would want to work there. And it was partly because we visualized it. Same thing with software. I visualized what the software was going to do, who it was going to help, who we were going to work with, who we were going to meet. We tried to visualize how successful it was, but I don't think we could even imagine where it got and where it was heading. The next thing is acting as if. And this is important because this allows you to connect your emotions and your physical actions with this dot in the future. And it's really like in my mind, I used to practice myself talking and acting as if like, yeah, of course I can talk. Or, it's kind of like when you're a kid and you're pretending, you're pretending to be a fireman or, an astronaut. you're pretending those things. And we stopped doing that for some reason. But if you can mentally, you're doing all this mentally. It's not like you're going to dress up and act all goofy. I guess you could. I know that my wife did something with Jack Canfield, and it was that you had to imagine actually being there and smelling the things. So, I mean, imagine if that dot, that huge dot, happened. What would it feel like? What would you say to your friends and family? What would you say to those people you're helping? What would it feel like to have that money in the bank? Or the bills paid off, or not having to do the commute anymore and you just work at home. Like that's the hardest thing about what's happening right now with the whole pandemic is people not being able to go to jobs. And there's a whole like sector that's like, nope, closed. We're totally closed. Now you need to imagine as if you had a job that's doing just fine during the pandemic. In fact, it doesn't even matter. Imagine that. What would that look like? What would that dot be? And that might be the thing you're dreaming about right now is I want this. I want an online business, or I want to invent this product, or I want to take this, whatever it is, and turn it into something successful. That's how you do it. And the last one here is feel the feelings. How does it feel to have a job now that you created that pays off the bills, that allows your kids to have freedom, taking your kids on vacation? I mean, there's this saying, I don't know exactly the steps, but it's like the step where Now you can go out to dinner and you can afford it. And then you can go out to dinner and you can get anything you want on the menu. And then you can get anything you want and a bottle of wine, and you can go to the nicest restaurant, or you can go on a vacation. It's like you keep imagining, what if your life kept leveling up to where you could afford those things? And again, I'm not trying to be woo-woo. I'm not trying to be like, if you're positive, the world will get better. I'm talking about if you're going to head somewhere, if you're going to make it from an idea all the way to that big dream, you have to find a way to stay positive, because getting there is easy at the beginning and it's easy at the end, but the middle sucks. And these are things you do that allows your brain to keep heading towards those things. And the crazy thing is, things start happening. Whether you call it luck, whether you call it God, whether you call it the universe, when you start having this positive energy and you visualize it, it's almost like God just says, okay, here you go. You get to do this thing. Like my wife always says, oh, you're thinking negative thoughts? Okay, my wish is your command. Like, there's power in words. Your words have the ability to like cast a spell over your future. It really does. Like, not in a weird way, but like the things you say, the things you feel, the things you think about are who you are and who you become. So what if you spent every morning doing this, doing these things? Like, this is your daily practice. Gratitude, dream, manifest. Every single day, find a quiet place, anywhere. Well, even if it's on the toilet or your drive to work, find a place. It'd be nice if you could write it down. So if you're driving, wait till you get to work or you stop somewhere. Start with gratitude. What am I grateful for today? And you always have something. Come on, you always have something. I know there's some days you're like, oh, that sucks. Well, at least I got a car that's working. At least I have a job. Even though I hate it, at least I have a job. Whatever it is, find those positive things. This is not about toxic positivity, fake. You're not faking it. You're just finding the things that are good. It allows you to build a better foundation. The next thing is dream. You need to dream, okay, what's next from here? The reason why people don't progress in life is because they never stop and ask, what do I want? What do I want to do? Where do I want to be? Where do I want to live? Where do I want to work? What kind of house do I want? What kind of car would I like to have? People don't ask those things. Instead, they look back and they just blame. They blame their parents. They blame their education. They blame their boss. They blame their community. They blame whoever they can blame. And trust me, all of us have things we can blame. But there is no way you get to that next level. You never achieve huge things if you're blaming. In fact, you probably need to remove that completely, because you're the only one that has the power to make whatever it is happen. And you're the only one to do nothing and make it not happen. Nobody's going to give it to you. Success is not a lottery ticket. It is not an Instagram account with a cool Ferrari and here's my garage. It's none of that. It's like doing these things causes you to take action and move to the next dot. Because when you start doing this, like let's say you change, your dot changes, and then you reach one person. I mean, imagine we built Kajabi, and then it helped you, whoever you are listening. It helps the people you've heard on the podcast, Dr. V, Tamsin. It helped them. It helped them change their lives. Then they changed other people's lives. Then they, had more income and people lost weight. And imagine all those steps. What if I had stayed negative in my life in that cubicle and never built a Kajabi? Now, I do believe someone else would have done something, because I know God or the universe always moves forward, regardless if you sit on your ass or not. But my point was, I wouldn't have been able to be part of that journey. And what if I hadn't gone and it just was different? What if it just became something else? But because Kenny and myself, we went for this thing, this idea that I had, and we built it, it changed all those lives. Now, it's time to think about the next dot. Okay, here you are. On my screen, I have a big circle. It says the present. And then on the far right, it has another circle that says the future. Okay, in the middle is a huge gap. It's a valley. It's almost like there's two hills. You're standing on the hill on the left, and that's the present. And then it goes down into the valley, and you're standing on the mountain on the right, which is the future. And we all know, like I just said, the beginning's kind of easy. You're excited. The end's easy because you're almost there. But the middle, the valley sucks. And it's scary and it's dangerous. I mean, there's even like Bible verses, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Like the valley it sucks, because not only do you have to go back down the hill you may have just climbed, you then have to climb back up another hill. And I think that's where we get anxiety from, because you know how it is. You're like, all right, I'm going to go build this thing. You're so excited. You're like, all right, what do I do now? You're like, man, that's kind of scary. And then you avoid it and you procrastinate and you start social media, playing video games, or just talking about it and never doing anything, or going to a lot of events and reading a lot of books. Those things are great. But if you're not doing this daily practice, you're going to start missing the fact that it's not this straight line. You're not just going to go straight across. You're going to look down where you're at. Imagine you're standing up in the sky again. You're on that dot. It's the present. And you know the future's out there, but there's no way you can reach it. The only thing you can do in this Minecraft game, the only thing you can do is eventually make a block, and that block can be one block away from where you are. And then you just look for that dot. Look down and find the dot. Like I started this whole thing, stop connecting dots. Just collect them. That means meeting people. That means writing things down, trying things. You know the old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's both. You need to get to know a lot of people, and you need to get good at something. You need to build something, because if you have value to give to others, that's when your future is endless. That's why that saying, the more people you help. See, back in the cubicle world, I only helped my boss, my team, maybe the client. Then on the side hustle, I could only help that one client, maybe a couple clients. And sure, I made more money, but it was eventually like I only had so many hours in the day. But then building a Kajabi allowed my customers to reach people all the time, people making money while they sleep, and then us as the owners to make money. Like, that's how you have to think about it, is what small steps can I do to get there? And it's really like, just look for the next dot. And on my screen now, there's more dots appearing. And it's really like every one of those dots eventually will allow you to get there, because you never know what the next dot is. And if you look around, you're like, oh man, if I just did this journaling this morning, cool. Hey, if I sent that one email, oh, cool. Maybe I'll sketch that one thing. Awesome. Cool. Maybe I'll meet this person for coffee. Cool. That's all it is just one step, one dot every single day. And I have this thing that I use, and I call it the GPS. I talked about in the book, but it's really like, you know, the GPS is so friendly. Like, if you want to go somewhere, you set the destination, and then it's like so polite. Turn left at your nearest convenience. You know, flippy U when you can. Turn right on Home Avenue or whatever. It's just really simple. Like, it just tells you where to go. It's never mean. It's like, hey, idiot, you missed that turn. It just tells you where to go. Well, here's the thing I think about. What if there was a voice that was telling you to go to that next dot? And there is a voice. There's a voice in there, especially as we start to get positive and full of gratitude and full of like excitement about where we're going. We'll start to hear God. Like, we'll start to hear God. And I say GPS stands for God pushing you softly. Whether you believe in God or not, that's fine. But think of something that's powerful, that's bigger than you. Maybe it's just you inside. Maybe it's your soul inside of you that's pushing you softly and getting you in that direction, because there is something positive in all of us somewhere. And that can push us in the right direction and get us to the right thing. So as I talked about my next dot, the thing I'm super excited about is CoachSnap. And that is actually coming out soon. We're having a test beta this summer. I'm so excited. But what I'm really excited about is I know this has opened your mind a little bit. And I hope you've been kind of journaling and doing this, but start doing this every single day this next week. And then let me know how it goes. Like, post something on social media. Let me know. Did anything happen? Because I know my wife, all kinds of things happen to her all the time. Her clients, things happen. Friends of mine that I work with, this stuff actually works. So thank you for tuning in. It's been kind of a long one, but it's cool. It's our Independence Day episode. Thank you for listening to this episode. And remember, you are the business. And when you come back here every single week, we're going to help you find that business inside of you.